this is our second event related to the remix, and Kent will speak about, and then I will speak about the remix styling. Yeah, Kent, hand over to you. Kent, if you
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Kent. Go ahead.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So folks, I love speaking about remix, and I could talk about remix for hours and hours and hours. And it could be fun to do that, but I think that it would be even more fun if you all speak as well. Here, let me share my screen really quick. So if you go to the meetup page, we have a link right here for signing up to speak at the meetup, and it is not a very long form. You can do it. There's so much that you could do to speak at about remix. If you're using remix, then I'm sure you have experience that you could share with other people, especially right now. Like if you want to be like known in a community, remix is like a really new community, so you can I guess make a name for yourself in the remix community. And we also actually, if you want ideas, the remix repo has an examples directory, and you could give a talk about any one of these examples and it would be interesting. So we've got plenty for you to speak on and practice your speaking skills and everything. So please do take advantage of that opportunity to speak. I think it's great, but I'm happy to speak with you all about forms. So that's what we're gonna do today. So I have a simple form here that all that it has is a form. Actually, I want to take the method post. I was just playing around with stuff. So we have our regular form, label, and a button, and that's it. Our label has an input inside of it for the committer. So this is part of a larger project that I have called Form Cs, which I created for a fundraiser for Team Cs. And yeah, so all the app does is it allows you to make a commitment to donate to Team Cs. So we've got a simple basic version of this form, and I want to talk about what this form does well and what it does not do well. So yeah, so it's just a basic HTML form. This has nothing to do with remix right now. We'll get to the remix stuff at the end. So with remix with forms, they actually work without any JavaScript. They totally work without JavaScript. The way that they work is if we provide a name like Cody and then submit. Oh, hold on, I need to refresh. Okay, let's do that again. Cody and then submit. We're going to get a refresh. You may not have noticed, but the whole page refreshed. You'll notice all the previous requests that we had for this page is gone now. And you'll notice also up here at the top, we have this query string that is followed after the question mark, where we have committer equals Cody. It literally is whatever you type in the input field is what is going to be set to the value of that field. So here we have our input name is committer, and so that's the property value, and then the property name, and then the value is whatever the user provided. So what's interesting here is that forms already know how to serialize the what was entered into the form into data that you can actually use. And the default behavior is to do a full page refresh and serialize that as part of the query string. And let's see. Yeah, so also, if you look at the network tab, the DevTools will show you that the payload for this request is in the query string parameters. And you can look at the source, view parsed. And yeah, so that's like, for one, anybody who's been doing this web stuff for the last just couple of years probably learned how to build forms by doing like a manual fetch request and stuff. But you don't necessarily have to do that. The browser knows how to serialize your form. But we don't really like our query params showing what the user just typed. Maybe they typed their password and that would be serialized as a string there for anybody who's around to see what they just typed. So we don't want to, like, that's not a solution, really. That's just the way that it works by default. So normally your form is going to have a method of post. And when you have a method post, then it behaves a little differently. If I say Cody here and submit now, oh, I forgot. Yeah, browsers and funny caching things. Okay, here we go. So now if I say Cody and submit that, we're going to get a 404 not found because my server doesn't understand this particular request. But let's see what the browser did. We don't care what the server's doing right now. So what the browser did was, you'll notice it no longer has the query string up here, but it does still have a payload, and this is in form data. And so we still have committer Cody right there. And if you look at the request headers, you'll see that the content type is application x www form URL encoded. Fun fact that I learned recently about this is the x dash prefix is basically a signal that this is not standard. This is experimental. But everybody, and that like was created years and years ago, everybody started supporting this, and so they couldn't remove it. And so this is the way it is now. So this is the standard, even though it's technically X prefixes are not standard, which is kind of hilarious to me. That's so the way that we do things with the web. So yes, this is how that post data is transmitted. That's the content type for a post. And then the server can access that via the form data of the request. So in any case, the browser knows how to take what we provided in our form as the user and put it into something that, that the server can understand and do something with. But there was a big problem with this, and that is that full page refresh. When we submit this, you'll notice that we get like all of our requests are gone, full page refresh. And there are a number of problems with that. One is focus management. So you totally lose focus when you do that full page refresh. Another is just performance. It is a lot faster to just make a fetch request and get that errors back or whatever, and display those contextually with the user's scroll position and focus state, rather than having to do a full page refresh. And so to sidestep those problems, we can add event listeners to these forms. And I've got an example of that in here in this client only version of our form. So let's actually open that up now. Okay, cool. So this is our actual app, but we're still doing regular forms. So there's still not a lot of remix stuff going on in here. So what we can do now is you can add an event listener. Maybe I should just do that. We'll take a step back. We're not going to look at this. We'll just do the event listener stuff. So we're going to do a script tag. We'll get our form query selector for our form. And now form add event listener submit. And here's our event. And what we're effectively doing is we're saying, hey, I don't like the default behavior of the form. I think that default behavior is no good because you do the full page refresh. And so what I'm going to do is I'll just let GitHub Copilot do this for me. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So we're going to prevent the default, and then we'll do what it does by default by ourselves. Maybe change it a little bit because now we know more what our API accepts or whatever. Yeah, now we can do something else. So we can submit the form via a fetch request or whatever. I'm not a big fan of the way they did this. Here, let me show you a much easier way to do this, GitHub Copilot. You can say event, current target, elements, name. There we go. And now we've got our committer. Or elements committer. There we go. It's the name is going to be on the elements. In fact, you don't even need the elements, but I like having the elements there. Okay, so now we've got our committer, and here what Copilot did was it said, all right, let's do a post request. We'll say our content type is JSON. we'll make our body be a string of JSON. And then when that server handles that request and sends back a response, we're going to anticipate that the response will be JSON, and then we can console log whatever. This will not work, of course, because our server doesn't understand this request. But just for the fun of it, let's take a look at what this ends up doing. Oh, hold on a second. Let's do a hard refresh. There we go. Okay. Oh, I'm just looking at the document request. That explains that. Okay, so here we've got our the request that we made. We're getting a 404 response code that's expected. Our server doesn't actually understand this yet. But we can see our request headers. We have our content type application JSON, and our payload has that request payload of the JSON. And if we look at the source, it's just stringified JSON. So then we can program our server to understand this. So like so far, our server hasn't understood any of the requests that we've made, but we can program our server to understand any of these things. So the browser can make the request in any way that it wants, and then the server can understand each one of these mechanisms for submitting data. And the benefit of this last one is that we are not triggering a full page refresh. We're just sending the data that we care about and getting back maybe some sort of response of some kind of either errors or whatever else. So that's as far as we're going to go with just this example. There are a couple of problems with this. So one problem is before our form would work whether or not we had JavaScript loaded. So like if JavaScript was on the page, or if it was like if the JavaScript failed to load, like let's actually take this form.js. We'll put all this JavaScript in this file, and we'll say source form.js. Okay, so we've got it in a separate page. We're loading the form.js now. It should still work, but what if we had some sort of runtime error like blah? Now, when that, did that work? Why am I not seeing an error here? Here we go. I think we're actually, what's happening is I've got the cache. So let's just disable the cache for now. Okay, so we're getting this error, blah is not defined. So our entire application is busted just because of this one runtime error. So if I try to submit Cody, then we are actually, in fact, going to get a full page refresh. And I suppose I should also update this to what people would normally do is we normally just leave off the method, right? Because we are going to prevent default anyway. And so if you have some sort of error in hydrating your application or something, and then you end up with users getting a full page refresh for showing what they just typed up here. And if they're typing sensitive data, your error just is a security vulnerability, your runtime error. So like one nefarious coworker finds out that your application has broken JavaScript, and so they're like, oh my goodness, look, it's showing me what I'm seeing or what I just typed. Let me go over to my coworker that I don't like and tell them to just go log in really quick for me, and I can look at what they just typed. Oh my gosh, like, isn't that awful? That's terrible. And it's just because you had a runtime error that prevented your form from preventing the default. Same thing would happen if that happened either before the prevent default happened. Luckily, if it happens after the prevent default, then you're not going to be in that same situation, because you will successfully at least prevent the default. So that problem won't be there. But again, the entire application doesn't work. And so now it's not just errors either. It's what if the JavaScript fails to load for some reason. So if you use the disable JavaScript feature in the Chrome DevTools, it will prevent the JavaScript from loading. It just won't load any of the JavaScript. And so here we go, submit that. And again, we get the full page refresh. So it's not very often that people will disable JavaScript. I think I saw some stat recently that it's like 1 or 2% of people do actually disable JavaScript. yeah, so like that's not as big of a concern, but it does actually happen. What happens more often is that JavaScript fails to load. Like I'm using your app on my phone and I'm going through a tunnel right after I load your document. Maybe if you're server rendering, I guess, then I load your document. And while I'm loading the JavaScript, I go through the tunnel and now the JavaScript hasn't loaded. So your app hasn't hydrated. And so again, we have the problem where it doesn't submit and doesn't work at all. And then the other thing, like if you're not server rendering, then I'm just looking at a loading spinner forever, and then I have to refresh when I get a connection again. So server render, I guess. So yeah, there are a number of problems with using relying 100% on JavaScript to load or for your forms to actually work. I suppose one other thing that's the maybe more interesting one is we have sizable applications that are real apps that are loading lots of JavaScript. And the more JavaScript that you need to load for your initial hydration of your app, the longer that hydration is going to take. And so, especially for users on slower connections, this is not great because it means that they can't actually start using the app until you're absolutely ready. And in fact, just yesterday, I was using YouTube. And I don't know if I can make this work, but I will slow down my network and we'll see if we can make that work. So I went to YouTube and they do server render. So I do see, well, they server render a skeleton UI. But eventually we'll get our search input. This is what happens when you do slow 3G. Maybe I should do fast 3G. Okay, here we go. It's gonna come eventually. Man, all right, here we go. So I just did a search, but nothing happened. I hit enter and it just cleared my search. This happened to me yesterday. I have a fast connection. So that's not awesome. That's not a great user experience. I don't think it's a great user experience. That's YouTube. Like how much money they have, and they have these simple problems. Wouldn't it be nice if your app would work whether the JavaScript is finished loading or not? That I think would be nice. And so that is what Remix can do for you. So if we look at our Team C's commitment form, and let's say we're gonna, no throttling, we'll just say, let's disable JavaScript. Okay, so all the JavaScript that our scripts are trying to load or whatever, those are failing to load. So we have no JavaScript on the page. And I can actually, let me show you the code here first, because I think that would make more sense. So the way that this works is right here. And let me start with the lowercase form. So you can actually use a regular form with Remix. You set the method to post. You have your label and your input and your submit button, all of that stuff. And then your action is literally in the same file as the route that's rendering the form. I think that's pretty cool. And here we have our form data. We're going to take that request to get that form data. This is a web platform API. So you to find the docs on how this works, you go to the Mozilla Developer Network or your favorite place for the spec of Java or of the browser APIs. And so we say request form data to get our form data. We can get our committer from that. We can do some validation and then we can go hit our database or whatever else we want to, because this is all running server side, and then redirect. I just redirect them back to where they came from, which is this form. And so with that all in place and JavaScript completely disabled, I can say Cody, and I am getting a full page refresh, but it works. It works. I don't have to have JavaScript enabled. And as cool as that is, we're still getting a full page refresh. It's not an awesome experience. So we do want to have JavaScript, but and also people don't often run around with JavaScript disabled again. So let's enable JavaScript. But this time we're going to say slow 3G connection. We'll do empty cache and hard reload. And we'll wait for that reload to happen. And here it is. We'll say Hannah. Our JavaScript is still loading. Look, still loading JavaScript. We haven't hydrated yet. but we submitted the form and it actually worked. So even for users with a slow connection and you've got a lot of JavaScript to load or whatever, your app will still work. Even if I go into the tunnel and the JavaScript fails to load and I'm looking at, reading through this, I'm like, yeah, I want to make a commitment. And so I say, type in my name. Now I come out of the tunnel, and so I know I'm connected again. So I hit commit and that request will be successful, even though my app was never hydrated. So there are a lot of situations where having a backend that understands a regular form submission and a front end that outputs something that will work without JavaScript is really powerful. It's really, really nice. And so Remix gives you both. So if we go to no throttling and refresh, and then we say George, then we're going to get the fetch request experience here. We're not going to do a full page refresh, and it will be much faster. And we can have inline errors here as well. Oh yeah, and the errors also work without JavaScript. So if we disable JavaScript, refresh, errors will work as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. The nice thing about JavaScript though is you can animate those errors. Without JavaScript, you can't really animate the errors. I mean, maybe if you're creative with CSS, you might be able to figure something out. But yeah, so if we say Joe, then that totally works. Another thing that I'll just mention here, because I can, is you don't see any state in here. There's no state necessary when we make this form submission. I actually don't have any code for handling the form submission. I have some optimistic UI code right here. We can talk about later, maybe. Maybe I should remove that so it's not distracting. It's totally unrelated to the example. I have some code here to reset the form after the submission is finished. But yeah, other than that, we are like, there's nothing going on here for handling that form submission and making sure my state stays up to date. So Remix makes sure that my state stays up to date. Oh, and it just occurred to me that this happens to me all the time. We actually, even with JavaScript enabled, we were doing the full page refresh. So here, let's try that without the full page refresh now. We'll do Marty, and now it's instant. And we get the optimistic UI. So actually, the optimistic UI is pretty cool too. So if I do a slow 3G and I say Peter, then you see that shows up instantly, even though the post request took 2 seconds and updating the data took another 2 seconds. And so that's basically what this is. That's all this takes. And if there's some sort of error in the process of like here, let's just do this for fun. Or the committer equals, let's see. I'm running out of names. How about Brooke? So if the committer is Brooke, then we'll return an error here. So now if I say, here, let's say Brooke. Again, I'm on a slow 3G. Here, let's no throttling, get that loaded, clear all this out. Now we're on slow 3G. And say Brooke and commit. Then again, we're on slow 3G. Committer must be provided. I didn't have to worry about, oh shoot, I did like an optimistic UI update. So I need to make sure that I roll back my my optimistic UI or anything. It's all just Remix ensures that your state or your data is completely up to date. Your error messages just come from this use action data hook right here. And you don't have to do anything for this optimistic UI stuff other than like when there is a submission, now we know who or the data for the submission. And so we can render that data optimistically. That's really all that it is. So Remix takes advantage of the full power of forms. And then with JavaScript, it can do even more. And I think that is really cool. And that is the power of forms with Remix. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kent. Now, now I will start. I'm just sharing my screen. Let me know when you are able to see my screen.
I can see it.
Okay, so I'm sharing my root.tsx remix styling project. Okay. Are you able to see the website also, remix.run styling?
Yep.
Cool then. Okay, yeah, thanks Kent for the power of speaking about the power of form. Now I will cover the styling part. Okay, so for that I have just noted down some key points about this. So like the primary way, like previously how we are doing in our web apps is to add the style is with the help of links and then rel style sheet and the href. So remix is also doing the same thing. So just the way of writing the remix is the different way, but internally remix has used the one links component. So remix has created the links component, so we have to just add in our header tag, and then they have written the code in such a way that so that they will apply the styles as per the routes. So if you would like to see the code of the links component, so you can just go it here, and you can also check the links component. So they have written their own logic, we don't need to take a look, but just if you would like to see how the remix is working internally, so you can take a look. So they have just like get the links as per the matches, like as per the routes they are finding, and they are in the middle. Like if you see here, they are just creating the link element, and then as per their logic they are just removing from the head and adding in the adding in the head. Okay, so like they have written their own logic. So if you would like to, if you are interested how internally this component is working, you can take a look on this. Okay, so so they are just adding the link styles as when the route is active, and when the route is not active, then they just remove from the head tag. Okay, so it will help us to increase the performance, because the some style we don't need it, so it will automatically remove it. And so just take an example of like we have four route. One is root, home, about, post, and post id. So suppose if currently you are on the home route, okay, so it will load the style of root and home style, because root is the top level. So suppose if you want your web app to upload some style which will be enabled on all the full apps, so you can add in the root. Okay, so suppose if you want to open the about route, so it will load the root and about style, it will remove the home style from the head tag. So same with the post route. Suppose if you are on the post route, so it will load the root and post style. And if you on the suppose post ids route, so it will load the root, post, and post id style. So because the post id assume like a the parent child of the post route. Okay, so there are different way to load a style on the app, like root style, use scss, because we are nowadays we are using scss or SAS in our project. uh, remix is not providing out of the box to support this file, but we can do it with the help of SAS translator. So remix only understand the css file, but we can translate with the help of translator. I will explain you with the help of example. And the remote style is like a bootstrap or third party style, any library you want to add. Or shared component style, link media queries. Suppose you want to load the style as per the mobile. Suppose you have three css, one is for the mobile, one is for computer, one for tablet. So you can mention in the I will show you with the help of example. You can mention what media query you want to upload, like what is the screen resolution. As per the screen resolution, it will upload either on the mobile, computer, or tablet. Same with Tywind. So they have mentioned in their documentation how you can use this one, post css or css in jest library. Okay, so for this talk, what I did is so that we will not waste a lot of the time to write the css, or so I have just noted down and commented out the code. So currently if you see here, I just Okay, so currently there is no CSS load in my project. Just plain, I have just created welcome to remix and 3 routes. So if I go into this, so it will load home route and the about route and the post ID. So under the post component, I have just, when you click on this, so it will upload the post ID content here. So if you see here, currently there is no style in the head tag. Okay, so now we will enable first one. So what I did is, what you have to do is just create one folder of styles, and under the styles you can you can create your styles like about extra large, global, whatever you want as per your requirements. Okay, so like I have created different styles to explain you in the different resolution or different routes. So so how we can, just wait a minute, I'm just enabling the code. Okay, so what I did is just I have used the, like, use the global CSS, large CSS, extra large CSS, and just import it and use in our, like, there is one link function which we have to export from our component, and in that component we have to return the object of, like, object of CSS what we have to add in our route, like rel is style sheet and href the link of the file. Suppose here is the style sheet and the global style you want to link, so global style is point to this URL. Okay, and the style sheet and large style. So what I told you about the media query, so this style will load, like will use when the minimum length is 1024, and this style will extra large is will apply when the minimum width is 1280. Okay, so I will show you. Wait a minute, I need to disable this firstly, because this, sorry. Okay, so if you see here, I have just loaded one CSS is the global style CSS. So if you see here, firstly the bootstrap CSS is loaded and the global CSS. If you see here, just they have added the hash code for the cache purpose. Okay, so if you see here, here the only the two CSS is loaded. Suppose if I go into the home component, so what they will do is, I think I have to, oh, this is like they have loaded the two one. Now I will go into the home component and just enable the same thing. What we have to do is just export the function of links, and the way of writing is just return the array of styles whatever you want to export it. Okay, so like I am just rendering the home style, I'm linking the home style, and if I refresh the page, and if I go into the home component, if you see here, the color is changed to red because I just use the div to color, just change the color of the div element. If you see here, the home style is added. If I go into the root level, so the home style is removed. So that is the power of remix. So whatever, as they are loading the styles as per the routes. And suppose if I change the name of this, I show you here. Suppose this is a links component. Okay, if suppose if I change to one, then then the remix will not understand, okay, this is the links component, and the styles will not apply. So we have to strictly follow the name. Why we have to strictly follow it? Because in their code, in their links component, so they have mentioned, I think I have to go here. Wait a minute, I'm just opening this. So if you see here, links. Okay, so in their components, in the links component which the Remix has created, they have strictly mentioned the function name should be links. If you go here, the function name should be links. If you give any like more dot links, so then they are calling this method. Otherwise, they have just commented out like empty array. They are just setting it. Okay, so the name should be links. If you provide another name like links 123 or any name, then they will not understand. It should be links. Okay, so we need to take care about this. Like when I set to links, then they have just uploaded the links. Okay, they have just added the css. So if I go here, then they have added the css. Now I will go with the about. Sorry, just to save the time, I have commented out the things so that it will not take much time of us. I am sorry. Okay, I'm just quickly like uncomment the code and just adding the css in the links component, nothing more than that. And now we will see here we have two css. If I go into the about component, so only the about css is loaded, and the root level css, root level always added it. Okay, if I go into the post css, like post component, then the post css is uploaded. But if I go into the like if I added the post id, like the post id component is rendered, so it will load the post id plus post, and the global css is added. Okay, so this is like the things what I like is the they are loading the css as per the routes, so it will increase the performance and all. Okay, and now I will show you the media query. Okay, so currently I'm just reducing the size. Okay, if you see here, the color of the text is changing because I have changed the color. I have changed the color as per the like in the big styles and the extra large style. So we see here now the minimum width css is applied, and if I go to down here, now the another css is applied. So why this is happening? Just because of this. And if you see my css here, extra large css is like a color is aqua, and in the extra large and the large one, the color is blue. So like means they are also, means we have to do the minor changes, and they are using the default like browser behavior. They are just adding like this is a link web api, and just they are adding as a media query. So media like minimum width should be 1024 and minimum width is 1280. Okay, so next is moving on to the scss, like how we can upload the scss files. Okay, so suppose I have I have created two scss files. Is one is main and one is nave, like nav, navigation css. Okay, so now the remix will not understand this scss and scss files. Okay, so for that what we can do is we can what I did is I have just in the package.json, what I did is I have installed this package, sas package. So you can check. So I have downloaded, I have just installed this package. What this package will do, this package will help us to convert the css into the css files. Okay, so I have just included this one, and the concurrently I think you know about this. It will help us to run two css, like two commands at a single time. Okay, and what I did is just SaaS dev and SaaS production. So what I'm doing is just SaaS and hyphen watch update, and just I'm doing here is converting the SaaS file into the CSS folder. So suppose when I run this command, dev css, what it will run is npm run sash dev, and npm run sash dev will convert in like run in the watch mode. So watch mode means whenever I make changes, so it will also pick my current changes, and whatever I have in the sash file, it will convert the into the css. So something like this, if I run is dev css. Okay, if you see here, whatever like they have created the css folder, and whatever I have in the main dot scss, it will convert into the main dot css as per the like means they have written their own way. And for the nav css, like we can write means the css in this way, and here how they have converted into the css. Now we have the css file, so the same way what we did before, so we can include this nav css file. Okay, so now this is my main css, and here I'm in just including the main.css files. So I just enable this and enable this. Now just refresh the page, and if you see here, my main css is applied, and the same with the nav also. So if I go, yeah, so same with the nav also. So I just I'm not doing anything extra. I have just converted the scss file into the css file with the help of sass uh, sass package, and now you have the css file. So if you have the css file, you can easily include in your components. So the same, the remix will behave the same, like they load the css as per the routes. Now the nav is, now the nav css is also applied. So if you see here, the nav css is also applied. Okay, so I have covered this part is styling part, link media. So if you would like to understand more on this, like how the media query works, so you can read this document, and I would suggest you can just practice from your side to include the css and how the css works. You can also check the links component of the remix, how the internally they are doing, to understand for your knowledge. Okay, and you can also like you can, if you would like to use the tailwind css, so you can just check the documentation, and they have written in a good way. You can just use in your project. Same with the remote style, I have already uh, means how we can inform, how we can include in our project. So I have added the bootstrap css. So like you can add any css, there is no restriction here, or the post css. So if you would like, means if you are using in your project, so they have also uh, explaining the details how you can use in your project. Same with the css in jsl. So if you would like, you can use this one. Yeah, so that's it from my side also. So do you have any question?
Yay!
Thank you. I'm just stop share my screen. Yeah, so anybody have any question uh, to Kant on me, or anybody? I think Bala has something. Yeah, I'm just checking in the chat if somebody asking some question. Really looking forward to learning remix. Where are we using links function? So yeah, so I'm just sharing my screen. So you have to include in your in the root, you have to use in your main component. Yeah, in the under the head tag you have to include here. I think Vinay, this is. Are you looking for this?
Yeah, got it.
Cool, cool.
So, I have one more doubt, like regarding the media query that we are using here. So, let's say we have three styles, that one for I want to use for only the mobile, and one for tablet, and other one for desktop. So, can I achieve this kind of functionality in this? Like, I have three CSS file, and I want to consume one for mobile, and other one for desktop, and other one tablet.
I think so. Yeah, you can use it. Just you have to mention here the media query like resolution. You can define here. Am I right, Ken?
Yep, that's right. And what's interesting is the browser will actually still load every one of those. So it's not going to prevent it from loading those styles, but it will prioritize the one that currently matches. So it will load faster when you split it like that.
Okay. In
And
that case, browser will load all the three files, right? Mobile as well as desktop as well as tablet.
yeah, yep, exactly.
Okay.
There's and this is not a remix feature. This is just remix using a browser feature. So yeah, these are just attributes on the link tag.
If you want to
Oh,
say the link HTML and I think MDB, or you can also check in the W3 or the MDN here. So the media,
got it.
okay, the media one.
So I just want to say, like, I think that if I'm loading on the mobile device, that it will load only for mobile CSS. So okay, fine then.
It will
Yeah.
load the free CSS, not the only the mobile one, but it will prioritize the, like if you are on the mobile, so it will prioritize the mobile CSS. If you are on the tablet, then it will prioritize the tablet CSS, and if you are on the web, then it will prioritize the web styles.
Yeah, and also it will only apply the styles for the matching media query. And so the reason that it loads all three is because the browser size can change, and so a different media query could change, and so they don't want to load the styles when it changes. They want to have the styles ready, but they will only apply the styles that match the media query.
Okay, fine.
And if you see here, like the example here, which what I am showing here, if you see the large CSS and extra large CSS, both are loading. Okay, just the priority one is as per the screen resolution. I think this is a live
Okay.
example. You can take a look.
Fine.
Cool. And the second one is just one. You don't need to use links function. You can export it, and Remix will take care of export link component. Okay, great. Yashwant, do you want to say something? You don't need to.
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was wondering if we can use some adaptive feature also with the Remix. Like suppose we are rendering particular component only for mobile and not for desktop. So how to handle that? Uh, that is one question. And another question is, ideally, I think the CSS should remain together with the component or within the route. And if we are putting our styles together with the route folders, like suppose in the example that you mentioned, there is some styles which is mentioned with post ID. And if we want to use SCSS, how are we going to use that?
So I think this is your you have to take a look like the shared component style. So means in the shared component, so you can provide the CSS like as per the component, and here I think So like this is a button component, okay?
No,
And you are
I think my question was like ideally the CSS should be together with the like here in the app component button, the style should be there only, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you're asking about component styles, and right now Remix, the way that you do that is you can co-locate the CSS file next to the button, like we're doing in the shared screen here,
Yeah.
where the style CSS is right next to the button. And then there are various ways to make sure that that gets on the page. So like for a button, you'd probably put that in your root, and you can either just import it as a link, or you can combine it with a CSS processor. But we are also going to be adding even better support for component level styles in the near future with CSS modules and vanilla extract. So yeah, look forward to that.
Okay. And my first question was related to adaptive components.
So adaptive meaning you serve up different CSS based on the request?
Not CSS component based on different screen sizes. Like suppose if I have certain components which are not to be rendered on mobile screen, so can we do that?
Yeah, well, so if you want to do that for the server render, like this has nothing to do with Remix. If you want to do that for the server render, then you need to do user agent sniffing. Not necessarily a great idea. Adaptive stuff was never a really great idea, I think. But yeah, what you want is more responsive stuff, because responsive works whether like responsive works for the server render, it works without JavaScript, and or more importantly, works before JavaScript. So yeah, anyway, I would say that what
There's still
you
like, is there any way in the server side can we do the users user agent sniffing here in Remix?
yeah, you can. You have the request object that has the user agent on there, so you can do user agent sniffing with Remix. But again, yeah, that is wrong a lot of the time. So I wouldn't recommend that approach. But if that's the approach you want to take, then you can take it with Remix.
Yeah, thanks.
okay. So the next question is from Divanshu. So Kent, like in your last example, you have added the brockie, and then it added in the list, but after we get the error and then it removed from the list. So can you explain that again? Like Divyanshu want this.
Yeah, so that was when I was showing you what happens when the optimistic UI is wrong. So optimistic means we're pretty sure that this is going to work, but it might not. So we'll just hope that it works. And if it doesn't, then we need to roll back. So that's exactly what was happening. But I didn't have to add any logic for rolling back. And that's what I was demonstrating. So I added some logic to the action to say if the committer is Brooke, then return an error instead. And then my optimistic UI says that as soon as a form submission happens, let's go ahead and add whoever was submitted to that list immediately, so that we can optimistically display, like, we're going to assume that this is going to work. So this is what it's going to look like when it's all finished. And so when we submitted, and that failed, Remix went and revalidated to make sure that, or to go get all of the latest data, and that's when the when Brooke was removed from the list there. So yeah, that's what optimistic UI is. You're hoping that it's going to work, and if in the event that it doesn't, you need to make sure you roll back any UI changes that you made. And with Remix, you don't have to really think about that much. Yeah, so it isn't quite wrong. So I guess the I'm not sure if this is a question, but they're saying, is that quite wrong to show the data even when the request may cause an error? I mean, it's a product decision. When most of the time what you're doing is going to be successful, then it ends up being a better user experience to just assume that it is. And then if for some reason it isn't, then you can revert. This is a really common pattern that predates Remix by years. So yeah, I wouldn't say that it's necessary all the time, but it sure does make for a nice user experience sometimes.
Okay, so I think, yeah, now. I think it's clear now, Devanshu.
Cool.
So next question, I think Mihir, do you want to say something?
Yeah. Hi, Anuj. Thanks a lot, Anuj and Kent, for the talk. My question only is, since Remix is still really it's pretty new, what are the immediate drawbacks of using Remix versus something like Next.js? Like, are there any features available in Next.js that are still on the roadmap for Remix? Where the
Yeah, so
trade-off?
there's nothing that you can do with Next that you can't do with Remix. And there are some things you can do with Remix that you can't do with Next. I think that's the question that you're asking. So yeah, Remix is relatively new. It is newer than Next, but it is more capable, and the developer experience is a lot better. And so just like in a day or two, we're going to publish an objective comparison between Next and Remix, and it's going to blow your minds. So look forward to that. It's going to be pretty comprehensive, both like a deployed example with a blog post that goes into the differences between those two.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, Kent, I have one question. Something like we are using the client side rendering. Okay, so suppose if we use the Remix, then we will use the server side rendering, and then it will load. We need a lot of resources for that. Like it will cost the resources. Like if you use the AWS, then we have to pay more because everything is going to the server and then get back. So a lot of the server will load, we have to load more and all things. So is there any way like we can reduce these things and all, or
yeah, sure. So for one thing, modern infrastructure is getting extremely cheap. If you want to run a node server, then that can be more expensive. But if you're using serverless or even better, compute on the edge with something like Cloudflare Workers or Fastly or AWS Lambda on Edge, then that's like very cheap. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be quite as concerned about the cost there. And then on top of that, what you get is something that's way more capable. Yeah, that modern infrastructure is really, really good.
okay.
So if you're literally setting up your own box, then that can be a little more expensive. But I would just say use services that are a lot more affordable and also way more capable.
Cool, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Kent.
I was just going to say, since the last question was about comparing to Next, Next runs really well on Vercel and on serverless, but it cannot run on compute on the edge platforms like AWS Lambda at Edge and Fastly. Their edge compute, I think is what it's called. I can't remember what their thing is called. And Fly or Cloudflare Workers. Next will never be able to run on those, I'm confident. So that's another differentiating factor there as well.
Cool. Thanks. Anybody have anything? If you have any question, Mahir, I think one more question do we have?
Yeah,
This is
just
the last
one
one
thing.
because we are, yeah.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Just one last thing. How tough or how complex is the migration from Next.js to Remix?
It'll be easier. Well, it kind of depends on a couple of factors. So yeah, like how heavy are you relying on certain things within the Next ecosystem, I guess. But like I did a migration of one app from Next to Remix, and I wouldn't say that it was like terribly difficult because they're both using React, and so lots of the components are going to be the same. The biggest difference is the data loading experience is quite different, and so yeah, how you end up loading data has a pretty significant impact. And like you can still use like use SWR in Remix, like that still works. But and so you could incrementally migrate to loaders for something like that. The routing is different. You don't have to do as much work for routing when you're using Remix, so that's actually kind of nice. Yeah, let's see what else was. Also, the app that I was migrating was using CSS modules. And right now Remix doesn't support CSS modules, but it will soon. So when that's support is there, then that will be easier. Yeah, that's it. I wouldn't, and if you've got like an enormous app and you can't just like move everything from one router to another, because you do have to do that. You can't use Next router inside of Remix. Then in that scenario, what we recommend is running both at the same time and migrating one route at a time. And that's actually a pretty solid strategy for incremental migration anyway. So.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, thanks all for joining, and we will we will do the next event on next month, and I will post the event on the mostly after 1 to 2 days, just finalize the speaker. So guys, if you would like to speak, just I have just add the form in the chat, and you can also find the form link in the group also, group description. Please like provide your suggestion. If you have any suggestion, just let me know, or you can also join the Discord channel, provide your suggestion, and if you would like to speak, just let us know, or just fill the form so that we know all the details, and we will schedule in the next event. Yeah, so
Thanks everyone.
thanks
Thanks,
all.
Kent.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Kim. Thanks, Anuj.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks all.
Have a good night.
Yeah, good.